Hi, this is Ken Johnson for another episode of SecCast, and today we have our last episode in the Rails-based OWASP's Top 10 series. Today's topic of unvalidated redirects and forwards is actually a very straightforward topic to cover. It really boils down to taking user input and then redirecting a user to a location based off of that input. Of course, doing it insecurely is the real issue, so we'll cover how to do it properly. You might ask yourself why redirecting a user to some arbitrary website is an issue. Well, if you watched the video regarding XSS earlier in this series, you saw how redirecting a user to our website allowed us to steal photos of their computer. There are some very atrocious things a malicious website can do to a user. Allowing your trusted website to send a user somewhere malicious, well, that's bad policy and hurts your organization's reputation, along with just plain hurting your users. Let's give a quick example of what this attack looks like. You can see in the URL we have a parameter named URL. The intention here is that if a user is not authenticated and requests a portion of our site, we'll redirect them where they want to go after they've authenticated. We do that by reading the URL parameter. You can see it works pretty much as expected. Let's log out. Now we'll request nVisium.com to demonstrate that the location of the site we send them to really is arbitrary. Maybe the intention wasn't to send us to any other domain to begin with. Either way, you can see that the site redirects us to another domain. Again, with really no idea whether or not that domain is safe. Let's take a look at the vulnerable code. You've probably seen code like this before. If a URL parameter is present, we end up redirecting the user to that URL. The only real validation is that the parameter is present. So let's add some logic. Let's say we really only need to redirect a user to a path within our application, and not necessarily another domain. I like to use the URI library versus my own regular expression if I can avoid it, since it's easy to introduce flaws without knowing it. So we'll parse the URL parameter and extract the path. We'll try redirecting to nVisium again, and as you can see, it redirects to the root path, which redirects the user to a dashboard. And this is much safer. Now, if you need further validation, create a validation routine. In our case, we've got a requirement to send a user to another domain. However, instead of sending our users to any domain, we'll restrict them to a list of acceptable domains. Let's call validate URL, and for simplicity's sake, we'll define the method within this same controller versus somewhere more systemic. So we'll define this validate URL method. Basically, we're going to say if the host matches nVisium.com, then it's an acceptable domain. Otherwise, it's not. So we'll say if this array includes the URL parameter, which we'll add some parsing to here in a moment, then return that param URL. Otherwise, redirect them to the root path. Now we need to parse that URL parameter to determine the host or domain the user is requesting. Let's try a request with nVisium.com. This works. So from a functional perspective, it's working. Next, we'll try something not in the whitelist. In this case, Google. As you can see, we're redirected back to the root domain. One last thing I want to note is that we should also validate the scheme. As you can see from OWASP's Rails cheat sheet, there is a potential attack avenue where the scheme would be a JavaScript scheme. Now, I'm guessing they retrieved this value from Igor Homakov's tweet regarding bypassing the check I previously described. Igor mentions the scheme you see here. Now, I wasn't exactly able to easily replicate this attack vector, but let's validate the scheme provided for safety's sake. We'll add an AND to this if statement and create an array that consists of HTTP and HTTPS. If this array includes the scheme retrieved from the URL, we're good. Otherwise, we'll revert to the root path. Also, because parsing can lead to errors if the URL is not properly formed, we'll add a rescue statement that redirects the user to the root path. So we'll try to perform an XSS attack using that attack string. As you can see, we're safely redirected back to the root path and in the dashboard. Once again, we'll test that the functional part of this works as expected. You can see that we are redirected to our whitelisted domain. So we've discussed safe redirection and the OWASP'S A10 category. I hope you now have some techniques you can use to safely redirect your users and protect your organization's brand. I'm Ken Johnson. This has been another episode of SecCast. Thanks for watching.